Well, I still have in my files the article that Barry Goldwater wrote in 1994 where he said, the conservative movement is founded on the simple tenet that people have the right to live life as they please as long as they don't hurt anyone else in the process. The radical right, said Barry Goldwater, has nearly ruined our party. That was 1994, 13 years ago. What's your explanation for how this happened?
The interesting thing was, if you go back to the Goldwater campaign and see his speeches, the word spiritual, the spiritual side of man is very much in every speech. At that time, he was arguing against a material, the idea of which he accused President Johnson and the Johnson administration, being materialistic. The spiritual, he spoke of the whole man. So he used the word spiritual and he used the word God. But what happened was, when it came to the line of injecting a religious belief, of putting, for what we're talking about, it's keeping government out of the boardroom, every Republican conservative understands. What they don't seem to understand is keeping government out of the bedroom, right, in private lives. Goldwater understood that. If you had told me, and if you had told Barry Goldwater, that we would one day have an office in the White House called the Office of Faith-Based Initiative, what kind of Orwellian language is that? Faith-based initiative. That's the Office of Religion, the Office of Religious Outreach. How do you put that in the White House? It's not simply a question of separation of church and state. I'm talking about a separation of church and politics.
The Terry Schiavo case seems to have been a turning point in all of this, don't you think? That seems to be a moment at which people like you really began to be aroused that the religious right would bring that issue so powerfully into the White House.
Well, think of what it was, aside from the emotional side. Think of what it meant constitutionally in terms of conservative principles. One of the things, and the hypocrisy of the Tom DeLays and the people who brought that, the cry has always been activist judges. We don't want these activist judges interfering. All right, what they wanted to do, and also the principle of federal government over state. Here you had state courts that ruled on a thing. Congress, under the quote Republicans unquote, passes a law which takes a case out of state jurisdiction and turns it over to the federal court. The president, who didn't have time to fly over to come to New Orleans at the time of Katrina right quickly, flew back from Crawford, Texas, to sign this bill. They sign a bill which takes a case out of state hands and puts it into federal hands. Now they turn it over to a federal court that says, we don't want this case. We don't want this case. And the pitiful thing was they take this personal family tragedy and they elevate it into a national case. I'm
intrigued by the fact that as Goldwater began to unfold his views over the years, and I had left politics, and he was saying things like, he was supporting the rights of gay men and women. He was voting consistently for Roe versus Wade. He was talking about the separation of church and state, which he respected. He was concerned, as many of us were, about the religious right. I began to say, who's the conservative here and who's the liberal? So my question is, what happened to those Goldwater Republicans? Did they leave him?
No, they didn't leave him. They now feel we can't win an election unless we have the theo-conservatives, the religious right with us. We can't win an election unless we have these are our ground troops. These are our storms. But when you take them in, it changes the character of the party. You win, but do you win on any principle that you stood for?
Well, they won twice, 2000, 2004.
They won. You said they won. That's I think that a lot of conservatives like me have discovered. I voted for George Bush in the year 2000. And in 2006, you found out a lot of defections. Like I opened the book by saying I was actually rooting, and I wasn't the only one. There are a lot of people like me, conservative Republicans like me, wanted to lose, and who feel we have to go back. It's best to lose and go back and reform what we believe in.
Back in 2001, you wrote the profile of the new vice president for the official inauguration program. You wrote, quote, speaking of Cheney, a man of gravitas with a quick and easy wit, a conservative who will see a road less traveled, a political realist who sees his country and the world around him not in terms of leaden problems, but golden opportunities.
That's the person I knew. I mean, I wasn't writing bull. I mean, that wasn't just putting out pap.
So what do you think happened?
That is one of the great mysteries. I quote Madame de Stael in the thing. Men do not change, they unmask themselves. As you know, power can change people. I mean, you know this, when I was in the Army, I remember when I got my sergeant stripe, they say, now we're going to find out what kind of person you are. Are you going to be, lorded over people, or whether you're going to change? A man becomes vice president of the United States. Maybe all is, it's been a very good masquerade he's been putting on, because this is not the Dick Cheney any of us knew. If you recall, when George was elected, everybody said, well, George may be inexperienced, but we had a good, stable person in Dick Cheney. And now what we have he's bombs away. I mean, we don't understand that. In terms of everything, the intransigent position that Dick Cheney takes on every issue, you find that reflected in the White House.
You're very angry in here about the war.
Yes.
Why?
Yes. Because I can say it, even though the people in politics can't use the word. I feel for those kids, and they are kids over there. They are getting killed every day, and their lives are being wasted. Now, when politicians use that, oh no, they're heroes, but their lives are wasted. This is a total. Then they're going to keep getting killed as long. And while they get killed, we have white tie dinners at the White House. This is not. The president says this is a total war. Where is the sacrifice? I know what a total war is like. You know what a total war is like. I feel for the families of the kids who are over there and the people who are getting killed in a war. And every day that passes, there are more of them going to get killed toward no end.
Well, this haunts me, of course, from the Johnson years, the war in Vietnam, the year we escalated the war so intensely in 1965. I remember dinners at the Smithsonian, dances at the Smithsonian. You know, there was a disconnect. And I remember a piece you wrote some years ago about how presidents get isolated. And you said they have to burst the bubble of celebrity and sycophancy. Remember that?
Oh, yes.
How do they... George W. Bush has disappeared into the presidency, hasn't he?
He's acting a role. I'm president of the United States. Do they really have their feet touched the ground? This is the thing that I wonder. We have people, when I say have their feet touched the ground, is this really a real life thing to them? Clinton, one of the things I fault this president for is the same thing as Clinton. How much time did he spend in the White House? My God, I remember when presidents spent time in the White House, all you have to do is drop a manifest on an Air Force One manifest, and they're off and flying. As President Bush said recently when he went out to Kansas to hug people, he said it's his job as president to comfort people. That was not, and by the way, that was not Lyndon Johnson's. I was no great admirer of Johnson's, but he understood there were greater responsibilities. But I felt that's what I had against Clinton too. This idea of what gets into him, it becomes a celebrity thing to him, and they get taken away carried away by it.